Hello everyone. I've been away from putting my thoughts down for quite some time now. There's been a lot happening professionally, personally, and as a result of which I haven't found much time to understand what I'm going through or compiling the thoughts together and being able to come up with some life lessons. Though I've experienced a lot of it over the last year or so, I've become better, realized a lot more that being slow, taking a deep breath, pausing where necessary, and trying to understand that it is not a 100-meter dash, but a marathon race. That has helped me on numerous occasions. But despite all this, I've constantly found myself in the middle of a lot of storms. And by the end of it all, I would sit back and ask myself, why is that I find myself in the middle of so many storms? Is it my personality type, or because I'm wearing my heart on my sleeve, I express my opinion without a worry, or probably without being sugar coated? Or maybe because sometimes I am not being quiet to being disrespected. Or rather, sometimes I'm not being quiet when I see something that's just not quite right. And I've found very contrarian opinions from a lot of people about why I'm reacting so and what I should possibly be doing. But I thought the best way to come back to putting my thoughts down, vocally sharing it with you all, would be to give a life lesson, describing what had happened, and possibly what I took away from it, and whether I'm walking away wise from that particular event. Let's just say that sometimes you put in 150% effort. You try to change something that you're usually not good at, and you try to change it with a lot of vigor, with a great sense of sincerity. And despite all that, people at the other end of the spectrum don't necessarily see it the right way, or probably take it for granted, in the sense that they see this renewed effort as something that an individual has given up on. The renewed effort that's coming in from my end or from anybody's end has to be looked at in the right sense, has to be looked at with a sense of responsibility. That someone who hasn't changed something in the past comes up with something new, with renewed effort, with focus, with understanding, with maturity, sometimes even taking a step back. Now, all this, which is not characteristic of an individual, when someone comes up with that kind of effort, how many times do people take it the right way, appreciate it, acknowledge it? Invariably, people think that someone has changed because he suffered, or someone's changed because he finds no other possible way, or someone has changed because he has an axe to grind. Now, none of this is true, and this is what I found myself in. That every time I put in 150% effort, way beyond what I usually do, to change certain things that I had introspected, analyzed, and found wrong about myself. And despite that, there were people at the other end of the spectrum who were not appreciative of it. I kicked up a storm. I expressed unequivocally that this is what I have been doing. I've been putting effort sincerely because I wanted to change something for the betterment of everybody at stake, for the peace at large, or because I was being considerate, or because I wanted to be empathetic about it. But then it wasn't taken up in the right way. Instead, I was met with a jibe, some criticism, maybe even things that I would not take lightly otherwise. And I only found myself scratching the head and saying, here I am putting in so much of effort to change certain things voluntarily, and yet I'm thrown under the bus. Invariably, I have realized at so many junctures of my life that I have expected and I have been a victim of over expectation. I have always tried to put in my best and be unconditional about so many things, but yet I have expected people to reciprocate in a similar way. Of late, I've realized that that's probably a mistake, and in hindsight, everyone is wise, and so am I. But when I look back, I also see that the last few years has made me a fine individual in the sense that I have always told people that I agree to disagree on something, and I've always told people that if I don't agree with you on something, it is probably because of that particular issue at stake, that subject at stake, not the individual at hand. I may not agree with you on several matters, but that doesn't mean it is a conflict between you and me as an individual. It is largely an ideological conflict and a view or a perspective on hand. And that's made me far better as an individual, where I've said everyone has a right to their own view, everyone has a right to their own perspective, and that everyone has a right to defend themselves. But can we defend somebody else besides defending ourselves? I guess that is also entirely possible, and we must give the benefit of the doubt to people to defend other people as well. But then, how effective are we in understanding the perspective and views of other people and then taking a moral stance for or against them? Highly debatable, right? And that's precisely what I feel too. So, in this life lesson, and what I've gone through and what I've realized is most often than not, when we put in the effort, we expect right away. We are all human beings, and I've read a lot of behavioral psychology, and I end up doing the same. I've probably become far more enriched at a mental level, but in practice, when I look back, have I been a good exponent of the behavioral psychology I've read? The answer is a big no. And I'm not ashamed to say it. It's because at least I'm trying. How many people would address their own behavioral issues? Or how many people would try and be a student of behavioral psychology and then try and say, yes, I'm putting myself to test in this? So, for me, as a life lesson, is I'm far ahead of the world at large, or far ahead of the people who aren't even trying to understand themselves or behavioral psychology and then addressing what they know, what they don't know, accepting the reality, then trying to get better, right? I may be failing, I may be reacting the similar way, my personality may be taking over despite the fact that I'm trying to put the behavioral psychology in play, but at least I'm trying, right? And so, most often than not, let's just step back and tell people, let's agree to disagree on this. Let's tell people that it's okay for you to defend yourself, but while you're defending somebody else, think twice if you understand their perspective and view from their own behavioral networks, from their neural networks, from the way their perception evolves. Are we accurate in defending somebody else? Let's think twice before doing it. The third life lesson I feel is I read this quote saying, being calm while being disrespected is a superpower. Superpower, you heard that right. But how difficult it is. Even after reading it, trying to remember it is a superpower, according to me. How can you just sit there still and watch something that you feel that you would usually react against? That is the third life lesson I feel at least me as an individual should put forward. Can we sit, observe nonchalantly without branding, looking into the eyes of an individual who's probably saying something mildly unpleasant, something that you don't agree with, something that you don't like, or, despite being disrespected, let's not use that term for a minute. Let's say it is something else that you usually don't agree with, or some, mild criticism that's thrown up at you. Can you just observe that, give them a smile, stay calm, and brush it away, then go back to your drawing board and introspect? Absolute superpower, isn't it? But how many of us will be able to do that? At least for me, that seems nearly impossible. For the individual I am, for how outspoken I can be, but can we try? And can we try in moderation? I took a note saying, can I look at it and can I give it back in probably a slightly milder way? Could I give it back with mild sarcasm or shoot back with just my thoughts? Could I probably control the tone better? Could I control my posturing better? Or could I just walk away from that situation to protect my inner peace and make it fairly clear to the people who are out there that I am not in agreement with what has transpired? So, largely, sometimes when I look back and when I pen my thoughts down, every day is a new day and life teaches you a lot of new things. But in those situations, how many times do we encounter something very similar? How many times do we find patterns in the storms that we are in? How many times do we see the frequency at which the same thing repeats? Is life telling us something? Is life telling us that we need to be out of this or we need to handle this better? Or that all this, the pattern, the frequency of the events, the storms that we are in, is life telling us something to look at closely, to introspect, to see what we could do about it? Sit back and think twice. Look back, analyze, introspect every single thing that happens to you, everything that you go through, every time you have a conflict, every time you're in the midst of some chaos, every time you're in the midst of a storm. By the end of it, can you emerge wiser? Can you change your behavior at least mildly? Can we try something different moderately? Can we put to practice at least 1%, 2%, something that we didn't do earlier? Can we do something like this every time we see it? And can we do all this not for the people at the other end of the spectrum? Can we do this for ourselves? Just to say we've become bigger, better, wiser, and that I'm geared to handle another storm come my way. These were my thoughts. I'm sure I'll be back with something better and more life lessons. I wish to share everything that I go through and some of the lessons that I take home. But the next time I put something to practice and I change something and I see visible results, I would definitely get back to sharing those. Thank you for hearing it.